The planet Silas IV was a graveyard of ambition. It was a world composed almost entirely of silica deserts, whipped by winds that could strip the flesh from bones in seconds. But the wind wasn't the enemy. The sand itself was. The planet was home to the Silica Animata. They were not individual creatures. They were a collective consciousness. A sentient, abrasive hive mind made of billions of individual, razor-sharp grains of polarized silicon and ancient, self-replicating nanites. They were a living erosion event. To the Animata, anything solid was just raw material waiting to be ground down. They moved across the desert floors like colossal, shifting dunes, faster than any tank. When they hit a human settlement, they didn't attack it. They ingested it. They flowed over walls like water, their trillions of microscopic teeth chewing through reinforced steel bunkers, stripping armor plating from vehicles, and reducing human defenders to red mist and bone dust in seconds. You couldn't shoot them. A bullet fired into the swarm simply passed through, hitting nothing but sand that instantly reformed. Explosives just scattered them for a few moments before the hive mind pulled itself back together, angrier and faster. It was fighting a hurricane with a handgun. The human 9th Armored Division, known as the Desert Rats, had been holding the line at Firebase Jericho for 3 weeks. They were losing 10 kilometers of ground a day. "They're eating the treads off the tanks while we're driving them," yelled Commander Rourke over the screaming static of the comms. His command bunker was vibrating as the leading edge of the Sandstorm began to grind against the outer blast doors. "Did you hear me, Command? We are being physically eroded. We need evacuation, not reinforcements." High above the atmosphere, aboard the orbital command station Prometheus, General Kalen Vance watched the tactical map turned entirely red. Vance was an engineer by trade, a soldier by necessity. He hated ground combat. He hated mud, he hated blood, and he especially hated sand that ate his tanks. "Evacuation denied, Commander," Vance said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Hold your position. We are shifting tactics." "Shifting to what?" Rourke screamed back. "We're out of ammo and the walls are getting thin." "We're shifting to geology," Vance replied. He cut the channel and turned to his orbital operations team. "Status on Project Helios Hammer?" "Mirrors are aligned, General," the ops chief reported, sweat dripping onto his console. "We've repurposed 20 industrial asteroid mining reflectors. They're locked onto the coordinates of the main swarm." On the surface of Silas IV, the Animata collective felt the humans' panic. The hive mind didn't have emotions, only hunger and a cold directive to consume. The metal shells grow soft, the collective grain whispered to itself in a billion scraping voices. "Their barriers thin. We shall flow into their nest. We shall grind their bones to add to our mass. They are temporary. We are the eternal grit." The massive, swirling dune, a tidal wave of abrasive death 300 feet high, crested the final defensive wall of Firebase Jericho. The human soldiers below looked up, knowing this was the end. They fired their rifles futilely into the face of the storm. Then the sky ripped open. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't a plasma bolt. It was something much more primal. 20 massive orbital mirrors, each the size of a city block, had simultaneously adjusted their angles. They caught the unfiltered raw radiation of Silas's massive blue supergiant star and focused it all onto a single 50-meter-wide circle on the planet's surface. The temperature within that circle jumped from 40 degrees Celsius to 3,500 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. The crack. The sound was deafening, not an explosion but the horrific thermal shock of the atmosphere itself catching fire. A pillar of blinding, godlike light slammed down from the heavens, striking the dead center of the Animata swarm just as it breached the walls. The effect was instantaneous. Sand is silica. When silica is heated to extreme temperatures, it doesn't burn. It melts. The leading edge of the sentient storm didn't have time to react. The billions of individual grains, the ancient nanites, the collective consciousness, all of it was instantly superheated beyond its structural limits. The sand couldn't flow. It couldn't scatter. It fused. The humans in the bunkers below shielded their eyes, their thermal sensors blinding instantly. The roar of the attacking sandstorm was replaced by a horrifying, high-pitched hiss and pop as millions of tons of silicate matter boiled. Heat. Unbearable heat. Cannot flow. Cannot move. We are. The collective grain's thoughts were silenced mid-scream. The pillar of light didn't just strike once. General Vance dragged it. Like a cosmic welder using the sun as his torch, he swept the focused beam across the entire width of the attacking swarm. The storm died. Not with a bang but with the sound of cooling glass. Commander Rourke dared to open the blast shutters of his command bunker 5 minutes later. The air outside was shimmering with residual heat, hot enough to singe his eyebrows. He stepped out, his weapon raised, expecting to see the remnants of the swarm reforming. He dropped his rifle in awe. The battlefield wasn't a desert anymore. It was a vast, surreal sculpture garden. Where the massive, terrifying tidal wave of sand had been seconds ago, there now stood a magnificent, horrifying monument. A towering, frozen tsunami of jagged, translucent glass stretched for a mile. The Animata had been flash-fused mid-attack. You could see the swirls where the currents of sand had been moving, now locked forever in twisted, glowing orange obsidian. There were statues of sand tendrils reaching for human tanks that were now encased in solid crystal. The entire hive mind, the unstoppable force of erosion, had been turned into the largest, most fragile art installation in the galaxy. General Vance's voice crackled over Rourke's headset. "Status report, Commander. How's the weather down there?" Rourke walked up to a 10-foot-tall spire of twisted glass, tapped it with the butt of his rifle, and watched a large chunk shatter and tinkle to the ground like wind chimes. "Clear skies, General," Rourke breathed. "And the enemy? Well, they're looking a little brittle." The conquest of Silas IV changed that day. The humans didn't try to fight the sand on the ground anymore. They stayed in their bunkers and let the Helios hammer do the work. They spent the next month systematically paving the planet, turning the sentient deserts into vast plains of smooth, silent glass. The Animata tried to adapt. They tried to burrow deep to hide from the sky. But Vance just increased the focus, burning holes straight down to the bedrock, turning their subterranean tunnels into glass coffins. Humanity had proven another brutal HFY truth. You can be an unstoppable force of nature. You can be a swarm that cannot be killed by bullets or bombs. But you are still made of matter. And if we can't beat you in a fight, we'll just change your state of aggregation. We won't kill you, we'll just melt you down and turn you into a paperweight. As General Vance wrote in his final report, the enemy had kinetic superiority. We countered with thermal supremacy. They wanted to be the sands of time. We decided their time was up. Planet secure. Mind the broken glass. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. When the enemy is dust, bring the fire. If you enjoyed this high-heat victory over the sentient sand, hit that like button. Comment below. What force of nature would you harness to win an interstellar war? Subscribe for the next story in the New Frontier saga, the Phosphorus Rain. The storm has passed. The desert is glass.